Welcome to Digging Deeper, YEG's development live stream here, brought to you by Clarity Development Advisory. I am Dave Onishenko of Clarity Development Advisory. As you can see, no raining today, so it's going to be me, but we do have a great guest here. I want to introduce you guys to Don Tolsma of Timber House Development. Don, thanks for joining us. Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about Timber House. We're going to talk about development in Edmonton. I want to start talking about, and we'll get into garden suites in a second here. So Timber House, you guys are an infill builder in Edmonton, primarily. Give me the elevator pitch here. What is Timber House? How long have you been doing it? What is it that you guys do?
Well, we've been in business for about 4 years now. And John and I started the business in 2017. Didn't really start anything until 18. We did work for another big builder, Lincolnburg Master Builder. That's where we started our careers. And we just wanted to try something different. And Lincolnburg was kind enough to kind of grant us that. And we got that ball rolling and then started off quite small. And we... anything that they don't do in the suburban type of builds, we will do it. So we'll do infill, we'll do garden suites, we'll do secondary suites and basements, we'll do acreages, anything custom. Mm-hmm. And then if somebody comes to us with a budget that they want to live in the burbs, we send them to Lincolnburg. And if somebody comes to us or somebody comes to Lincolnburg with a budget that they want to build in, more custom, then they send them to us.
Very cool. I like the symbiotic relationship. That's great. It's interesting. I mean, it's two distinct areas, but neighborhoods are something that transition over time, right? So those suburban neighborhoods, in time will become mature neighborhoods, and they go through life cycles. There's an interesting graphic we're going to share right now that we came across. This is from the City of Edmonton, their website, and it's talking about the life cycle of neighborhoods. And so Edmonton's a young city. A lot of our neighborhoods really have only had kind of one generation of growth. Some of the older ones have had 2 to 3 now. But, you see this in new suburban neighborhoods. The population explodes. Lots of young couples, young singles, young families with kids. New schools get built. They can barely handle the population. And then over time, those kids start to leave the nest. People age. They move out, they want to downsize, they, are moving to a senior's home, whatever else. And then you're seeing that first kind of cycle of, new life into neighborhoods. And then, populations either stabilize or they grow. So infill neighborhoods, great example, like it would be, we're seeing, especially, I'm going to say the last 10 years in Edmonton, this renewed interest. And there's been life cycles too, but renewed interest, especially in building in mature neighborhoods. So you may have seen, in a neighborhood that I used to live in Westmount, and there's homes that are 100 years old, and there's other homes that were built in the 40s and stuff, and they may have seen 1 or 2 generations, but it's really only been the past 10 years that there's been tons of new development and driven by interest of people who want that. So what are you guys finding in terms of your customer that's really driving them to build that infill and to pick a neighborhood and to say, I want to be, here? Like what drives your customers?
I think what drives us is multi-generational living would be the key. But two key neighborhoods that really, come to mind. I know you mentioned Westmount, and I'm gonna go to Westmount's cousin, Inglewood.
Yeah.
Inglewood is even as when I was younger, it was known as a very not so nice neighborhood, or Ritchie. Ritchie, again, a not so nice neighborhood to live in because of crime rate and homelessness and stuff like that. And of course, that stuff still does exist today, but those neighborhoods have become a lot more desirable by the younger crowd.
Absolutely.
Ritchie, you're seeing the breweries, you're seeing the market there, you're seeing a lot of the schools. The schools are more desirable. Mm-hmm. There's new schools being built, like you mentioned, the neighborhood renewals. You're seeing new streets, new sidewalks. You can just see those neighborhoods really coming back up. You're also seeing, multiculturalism. Inglewood, one of our staff actually lives in Inglewood. Two of our staff live in Inglewood. And one of the things they like is the diversity of the culture. They're seeing a lot of Ukrainian refugees coming,
Sure.
coming right now that are being sponsored and stuff like that. And they're coming to these neighborhoods, and you're going to see that diversity. Those two neighborhoods really stand out to me.
Yeah.
Timber House builds in all the neighborhoods, so we do see a lot of it. And just before we came on here live, I kind of mentioned to you that one of the neighborhoods where we're starting to see some garden suites, which I think is really starting to become a mature neighborhood, is Meadowlark. Meadowlark / Jasper Place, which to me does not really, I wouldn't recognize that as a mature neighborhood.
Yeah.
But that I think is the next up and coming, where you see that, on the graph there, you see that where you're coming up there, those houses are starting to get older. And people, when you talk about multi-generational living, people want to go back to where they began.
Sure.
And that goes through cycles, because you can buy a house in the burbs for, let's just go out on the limb and, keep it reasonable, but $450,000.
Yeah.
If you built that same house in a mature neighborhood, that's going to cost you $650,000. People say, why? Well, it's the land, and those costs that it takes to get a house knocked down, split it, put a house up. Yeah. There's many, many things that are involved in that. So it goes through that cycle of, they're born, kids are born, go to school, go to these awesome schools in these mature neighborhoods, end up university or to the workforce, go through their 20s to their 30s, maybe mid 30s. And now they got a real stable job with a good income. And they want to go back to, to where they grew up. And, in their 20s and to their early 30s, they go buy a house in, say, Summerside, or they buy a house in Rosenthal or something like that. And, they got some value in those homes. And then they hit that mid 30 to late 30 mark, and they can might have double income. It could be, a well-paying job where they're successful at the university. And they can afford to spend $650, $700, even $800 to $1 million on an infill home.
Yeah. So, I mean, and this is a good transition. So we have some pictures of some of your infill houses that you guys have designed and built. And, you guys do a wide variety of things, from kind of skinnies, which to our non-Edmonton listeners is effectively dividing up a 50-foot wide lot typically, and then you can put two narrower homes on it, to larger infill homes as well. And you guys have built a whole bunch of that. But something that we talked about, and that we're going to spend a bit more talking about too, is garden suites. And Timber House has some great examples of garden suites we're going to show. And you guys have built a bunch of these lately, so much so that you're probably the #1 garden suite builder in Edmonton right now. And these are really interesting, because this is that gentle density. This is that inclusion of more housing options, multi-generational living in mature neighborhoods, and something to build on what you were saying, that a lot of infill housing is expensive because of the land, because of the tear down and everything else. Garden suites are a great option too, to either offset your income, your mortgage payments, I should say, because you build that and you can rent it out, or maybe you build a garden suite or garage suite on the back of mom and dad's place, and that's an inexpensive place. All these options to allow different types of housing typology, I think, are great for mature neighborhoods, and I love that you guys are doing a bunch of that. So tell me about that. Tell me about what's been driving that and your experience with it so far.
Well, the biggest driver behind it, I guess, is my business partner, John. He lives in Old Strathcona, and his dream was to have a garden suite. And he's actually planning on building a new home now as well in front of the garden suite that he built. John got heavily involved in, I think even just prior to Timber House, but then Timber House became heavily involved with Yeg Garden Suites.
Yeah.
And Yeg Garden Suites is a non-for-profit garden suite. I'd call them more of a promoter / educator / whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
They really want they're urban planners. Ashley and Travis are urban planners that did a thesis study in, I believe I could be wrong on this, but I think it was in Waterloo in Ontario. And they did a thesis on garden suites, and they brought that back to Edmonton because they thought it was so amazing to offer multi-generational living, but also offset incomes, and to really create affordability, and which I think is what infill really needs to focus on in the next 10 years, as we continue to try to achieve the city plan. But anyways, John really wanted this garden suite, so he got involved with the Garden Suites doing these seminars, and we put together a little bit of a PowerPoint, and he would go up there as a builder and kind of explain, what his dream was, and what we're doing. And it started off obviously quite since we've started doing these inception of garden suites.
Sure.
But it's really just taken off, and we're seeing many different aspects of whether the mom moves into the backyard, mom and dad. You guys showed a picture of our ground level garden suite in the backyard of our neighborhood in I think that one there, that one's over in just north of North Glenora there, whatever that neighborhood is called. The name is beseeching me here. Right by
Woodcroft.
Woodcroft. There you go. Great up and coming neighborhood. That neighborhood is next on the hit list for the for redoing and getting new infill in there.
Yeah.
This garden suite is just a beauty.
It is. This one here. I love it. Love the deck on it.
And this is a rendering you're seeing here, but in reality, it looks identical or even better. And they built, so the husband and wife built this one for a rental. And what ended up happening was this COVID hit as we were building this, and their in-laws, the in-laws actually moved back from Pittsburgh. I believe it was Pittsburgh. Back to Edmonton, and that's where they're living full time now in that garden suite.
Wow!
So really good example there. We just finished up one in Inglewood, and for our good friend Jill Bagway and her son Ethan is moving in there. They're doing a little open house here on Saturday, actually, that we're gonna go check it out as to see it occupied in that space.
Cool.
And then you get into inclusionary, so that they're inclusive for wheelchair access and lifts and elevators, and we just for the elderly folk, right? If they're going to downsize and move in there. Yeah. You're also seeing Airbnb, and I think that's where John really wanted to see. He really wanted to test the market at his place in Old Strathcona. Right. You get the folk fest. You're going to get the fringe festivals. You're going to get all sorts of a good downtown vibe now that COVID is kind of behind us, sort of. To see what kind of money you could generate with that kind of market, and it's been very successful.
Awesome. Well, I love that. So one thing I forgot to say at the very beginning here that we do with all of our chats, because this is live, we have a live chat as well where anyone who's watching live, if you have questions, please post them. And I see right now we actually have some questions in the chat posted from our very own Rainan Solons, who's away right now in BC, and he's weighing in on this, and he's asking, how have neighbors been responding to garden suites? So how have your builds gone, and what the neighborhood has thought of them?
To be quite frank, there's been very, very minimal negative impact or feedback. Yeah. There's been a few, whether it's a neighbor across the alley, where they're concerned about privacy issues or that kind of thing.
Sure.
In all honesty, that's about the biggest negative impact that we've heard. Usually we're actually getting neighbors coming to us and saying, hey, how much does one of those cost? We want to have one of those.
Yeah. Interesting.
So yeah, the impact, it's actually a lot better than I thought it'd be. We probably have a little bit more negative impact on building homes.
Right.
Because we're creating a bigger impact on the neighbors than we are with the garden suite in the back.
Sure. So Rainan followed up with another question here. This is an interesting topic. He said, should we let garden suites be subdivided out of the main property? So right now, as a technicality for anyone listening who doesn't know, they are just part of the main property. They are a kind of like a secondary building, but it's part of one property, and they're subject to whatever the main house or duplex or whatever it is. So what's your thought, Don? Should we be able to subdivide them out and create kind of their own property off the back end?
I think it could get very complicated if you did that. So when you build a garden suite, first thing we do is we check out the sewer system. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times these, like you mentioned off the top, houses are from the 40s and the 50s. Those are in that range, sometimes the 60s, but normally it's before the 60s. Yeah. And 8 times out of 10, the sewer's going out the back. Right. And so the first thing we do is check that, because if we want to let our customers know that you can't build a garden suite on an old sewer, because it's just not going to be viable. especially to tie into it with the garden suite. So I think to and then you got to pull a water line from the house. So, to make sure that you have it's fully functioning, but you're on the same existing service as the house. So the water goes into the house, then goes back to the garden suite. The sewer comes from the house, goes underneath the garden suite, ties into the garden suite. Now, could you do that? I think you definitely could run a new sewer to the garden suite. You could run a new water line, but it's going to cost you $20,000 right off the hop just to do that.
Yeah.
And from my, with I guess a little bit of a thing that we have going on here with land titles. I mean, it would take forever you start subdividing all the garden suites and add that to the debacle that we already have with our land title systems. I mean, it might take a year and a half before you could get anywhere.
Well, I guess the other problem too you mentioned with servicing, because the city won't let you have cross lot servicing. So what that means is you can't have servicing for your property run from the roadway across someone else's lot to get to yours. So you'd have to create what the city and what they talk about in development is like a pork chop lot. So you'd have a 100%. Small sliver of that property to allow utility access down to the main house if it comes off the alley, for example. So there's a way for it. And the reason I think that Rain imposed this is one thing it does do, it allows it's a ticket to home ownership and maybe more affordable home ownership for an option. If it could be subdivided out and then someone could purchase that separately, because otherwise it's always going to be subject to that parent parcel. So you can rent it, you can live there and rent there from whoever owns the house, or if you build it, but it doesn't allow for kind of that affordable ownership necessarily if someone wants to move and buy a garden suite. So I can see that. I think there's probably some servicing issues and some complications. Access.
I think Dave, you possibly could condominiumize it.
Yeah.
I think that might be an option. We did complete a garden suite in Queen Alexandra last year, and they already had a garden suite on the we built the house, and with a legal suite in the basement, the garden suite was already there.
Yeah.
And they were very specific that they wanted 3 gas meters, 3 water meters, and 3 power meters.
Okay.
And we did that, and it was quite a large lot. I think I want to say it was even bigger than 50.
Yeah.
And so it was a 3-suite property, and so they're all legally addressed differently.
Yeah.
Right. So you have a G or a BSMT for the basement.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. So you probably could condominiumize it. And,
yeah, that's true.
And I don't know if you can necessarily sell off the basement per se, but definitely I don't see why you couldn't do the. I think you probably could make it work. It might take might be a bit of a challenge, but.
Well, I like that, and Rainan's chiming in as well. He seems to like it too. So that's an idea worth exploring some more. Speaking of ideas worth exploring more, I think the idea of new concepts of built form, that that missing middle. I guess it isn't really quite the missing middle, but different housing typologies. We have some other creative garden suites we wanted to show that we picked up from Calgary and Toronto and Vancouver that we want to kind of just go through. Some of these, you can move that ahead, Shirley. Some of these here, for example, it's more utility, design, unique design. This could be built in Edmonton, I would imagine. What is the limitation, Don, again, in terms of what's your size maximum that your garden suite can be?
So I just saw the one there that you had with a basement. You can actually do that in Edmonton.
Oh, we've never done it. Yeah, this one in Toronto here. Wow.
Yep. So you could definitely do that for sure.
Okay.
Anything that's below grade is not counted against your site coverage or your square footage of the legal. So you can do on the upper floor. So try to put it as simple as possible, but you can do 1,300 meters squared of the entire building above grade, but the site coverage for the garage has to be 12% of the total site coverage still.
Yeah.
And then, which allows you, and then you can work the math backwards with your some at grade and some above. And so, but if you do just a standard garden suite here, you can do 538 square feet above grade, above the garage.
Okay.
Unless you go to the inclusive design, which you have to have your, roughed in for a lift or an elevator,
sure,
or like a bunch of other stipulations, 3-foot doors, turning radiuses for the wheelchairs upstairs, stuff like that.
Right.
Then you can go to, I believe, and I might be a little off in this, I think it's 642 square feet
okay,
or 645,
okay,
which is 60 meters squared.
Right.
And they're ginormous. Like they're bigger than a small apartment.
Yeah, that's great. Why don't we go to the next here? Let's see. Yeah, here this one's kind of a crazy idea. Obviously it's just a rendering concept, but it looks like off the back of a townhouse in Toronto, and how many floors is that? It looks like 3.5, 4 floors.
Yeah, that's crazy. We would run into all sorts of problems here with height.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Like that one's even bigger. You can see off that top rendering, it's even taller than the main house. But again, probably more concept than anything else.
Yeah.
But I like the idea. Do we have any more, Shirley? I think that might be.
So, and just I guess for the people that
Yeah.
are listening or watching, Dave, from a mid height standpoint, I believe for Edmonton, I think we can go to, and I could be wrong. I think it's 6.5 meters
For the garden suites.
to mid span of height. Yeah, that's correct. The houses we can go 8.9
Yeah.
on the midpoint but that takes into account the grading. Which is again, that's a huge infill challenge in Edmonton, which hopefully with the new zoning bylaws coming here, whenever they get approved, hopefully the height is something that is resolved.
And is that your max height on the garden suite, even when we used to call them garage suites too, but it's all the same now. If it's above a garage, it can only be, what did you say, 6.8?
6.5 to mid span. So you're having 6.5 times
Mid span of the roof.
So that's 21 feet. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So we got one more one here, and this is kind of cool. This is looks like half container house, half open concept in Vancouver.
Beautiful.
Yeah, with the nano wall there that folds up. I could see this in, well, maybe you'd use it for a couple months of the year here, but it would sell really well in Vancouver, Arizona, or something like that. But
that would be a little bit challenging. I mean, there's some really cool things you could try in Edmonton as well. You'd have to get pretty creative with your air circulation and probably some heated concrete on the outside and a few other things. But
yeah, exactly. Well, as someone who's been shoveling away snow recently from entry doors and things like that, I just see that as being an issue right there as they kind of.
What you're saying is we should move to Vancouver.
There are worse places in the world to live. I mean, hey, don't get me wrong. I am a big supporter of Edmonton, but Vancouver is absolutely beautiful. But as we were talking about, and comes up every time, unaffordable. And largely because of a constraint of new places to build and a protection of single-family homes that you can't do a lot on. So you've got these, towers for condos, and you've got larger lot single-family homes, and everything is very expensive. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but obviously, nice place to live if you can and visit. But you know what, I like Edmonton. I like that it's affordable and it's a great place to live.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like infill is expensive. Infill is and is challenging, but Edmonton is still very affordable compared to most of Canada.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a drum that I continue to beat from the planning and when on any panels or anything like that. I think that's one of our best selling points. It's a great city, lots to do, and high average wages and low cost of living, relatively speaking, compared to other markets for housing and things like that. So I'll beat the drum of Edmonton all day long. I think it's a great place to live and to do business and to build great stuff like you guys are building. So I'm going to leave it at that, Don. We could spend all day talking, but we like to try to wrap it up and keep it short for our friends at home watching live and our friends who are going to be watching later. Thanks so much. Learned a lot and love the work that you guys do. Love what you're bringing to infill development in Edmonton and being advocates for infill. So thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. And if people do have questions, regarding our product or just have questions in general, you can go to timberhouse.ca. We have a chat on there, which is actually, it's not a bot. It's an actual salesperson that will answer your questions and hook you up. And we can simply answer questions. Or if you're looking at building a garden suite or an infill property, give us an email and we'll hook you up.
I will say, I was going to ask, and I completely forgot until right now. I've seen you guys have been running ads during Oilers games. That's great. There's a whole bunch of people watching games who are interested. Is that because you see a market there, or because you're an Oilers fan, or both?
You know what? It's a bit of both. I like analytics, so we wanted to try to run some commercials and to see what that looked like from an analytic standpoint.
Yeah.
So I sit at home with my laptop open when the commercial comes on, and I can see how many people go on our website and follow that traffic and kind of track that traffic. And then I think I had mentioned to you on the email here prior to, I think it was last week when we were setting this up. We were also on 6:30 Ched on Saturday,
Yeah.
and talked to the experts, and that was something that really drove a lot of traffic. So yeah, we're always trying different things and
Cool.
strategizing a little bit, and yeah, we're trying to obviously get more business, but we're also trying to educate and to become more of the community and become more of Edmonton. And so when people think of infill, they automatically think of Timber House.
Well, as a plug for Timber House, I couldn't think of better guys than you, Don, and John, representing that. And if anyone watching this does have any questions, yeah, shoot them a message. Check out the website. Talk to their live person on their chat function on their website. They are more than happy to help. Thanks again, Don. Appreciate your time.
Yep. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Shirley.
Okay, we'll talk to you later. See ya.